Greetings, my name is Timothy Halloran. The date is Thursday, July 2nd, 2020. In these videos, we're talking about the nature of the times, and we're not quite through with the year 2020. So in this particular video, we will be zooming in on a partial lunar eclipse in Capricorn, which I will be both explaining as well as emulating. First, a couple quick announcements. We have an ongoing raffle. You can win an astrology reading from myself, membership to my Patreon community, and more. All funds raised are going to the Metro Atlantic Mutual Aid Fund to support minority groups as well as those struggling with poverty. On my Patreon page, I am also beginning a new Astro School beginning this month. You can sign up for $24 a month. You're going to receive a monthly curriculum. You can join our monthly Q&As, ask questions from myself, and join our little and quickly growing circle and community. These days in the heavens, we see Saturn now retrograde back into the sign of Capricorn, where Saturn will remain through December 21st, not sure what that was. Jupiter is conjoined Pluto also at this time simultaneously. Jupiter conjunct Pluto, exposure, what's really going on beneath the surface. Now, Saturn began this year in the sign of Capricorn. The last several months pushed forward into Aquarius and now is rolling back. The unfinished business of bureaucracy. Themes from the beginning of the year as well as 2018 to 2019 can be resurfacing. Saturn and Capricorn themes can involve global tensions, societal adjustments, relationships to bosses or authorities, and dynamics involving power and control. Now, simultaneously, start of this month, Mars has entered Aries. Big dynamic energy coming in. Mars is going to remain in his own sign of Aries through January 6th. This is a very long Mars ingress of his own sign, and this is due to the fact that Mars will station retrograde coming up September 10th at 28 degrees of Aries before rolling all the way back to 15 degrees Aries on November 14th. So the next 2 months, Mars now in Aries, Saturn going backwards into Capricorn, there is a forming square between Mars and Saturn. And the next couple of months, we can anticipate these global tensions increasing and can be particularly at their highest at the end of August into the beginning of September. But as we already know, having a sense of what's going on in our world, this energy, this dynamic tension is already building, and this energy is already underway. There is an instinctual energy with Mars in Aries. Assertive, protective, defensive, angry, and reactive. Mars is going to come up to Chiron July 14th, just as Chiron is stationing retrograde at 9 degrees of Aries. Chiron stations retrograde exact on July 11th. So here we have this theme of instinctual triggers. Triggers coming from old wounds, catalyzing a reactivity, and this can be highly charged, highly intense. It's like one trigger leading to a reaction, causing another trigger leading to a reaction. This can be domino effects. This can be a highly intense, angry, and reactive time. We need to be doing the best that we can to be moving beyond this Aries age of an eye for an eye. And yet, this is easier said than done. It's not so much a simple black or white phenomenon, as I am going to explain when we further explore this dynamic, but we can certainly use these triggers that we can all be receiving from the world, from our relationships, from our immediate environments. There can be this reactivity, there can be this hurts, or you're stepping on my toes, or I need this and you're getting in the way. And these triggers can inform us, therefore, of what we need, of what those older wounds are. Chiron stationing retrograde is an opportunity to use this reactivity to somewhat process, to introvert, to go into our own individual healing journey deeper. And Chiron in Aries is about freedom. It's about having the space, the open road to explore our desires. This is what Mars in Aries is. Our desires, our selfish, individual, instinctual, animalistic desires. And these desires are not wrong or bad, they are necessary. We must be selfish. We must have the space to explore our own desires, because exploring our own instinctual, even animalistic desires is how we are evolving. We're exploring what we want. You know, Aries, the first sign in the zodiac, means incarnation. These are the cardinal signs, you know, Aries, Capricorn. So there's an initiation, there's a reason why we have these desires, and we must have the safe space, the open road to explore these desires. So again, we can use these triggers to reflect. This is what's been missing, this is what I need, this is the freedom that I am lacking, that's why I'm reacting when people are stepping on my toes. And Chiron in Aries is certainly this standing up for a cause, which is something I'm very, very much encouraging. This is a political time, this is a revolutionary time, and we need to be addressing societal oppression. Anger is not a problem. It is a useful emotion that's defensive and protective, but that's easier said than done. It's like a hot potato. It's very easy for the flaming sword of Mars to turn into a bush fire. Okay. But if we can harness it and use it constructively, anger becomes a creative jet fuel. So again, we're uncovering our unique experiences. This can be a time also of healing our sexuality, our bodies. Yes, Mars Chiron can bring up physical, bodily challenges or themes. And again, this is a time to really be tuning into our bodies, tuning into our sexuality, tuning into this instinctual fire coming from within. How is it informing us? How is it directing us? What needs attention brought to particular dynamics? Okay, so Mars in Aries can be quite physical. We're certainly seeing a spike in coronavirus here in the United States. This is predictable. The USA is going through its Pluto return these next years. The USA's natal Pluto is at 27 degrees Capricorn. So, lo and behold, an incredibly karmic time for the United States. All of these themes of racism, slavery is a part of the United States karmic return. Certainly, the United States is going down now in terms of the global economy. There is a global economic shift. There is a global shifting of power structures. This is due to be very intense the next 6 months. There can be global tension. There can be the threat of war. There can be this anger and reaction energy also in between governments, countries, nations, etc. And again, coronavirus is really driving some of these changes. This is something that is probably going to increase here in the United States. It is a real dynamic. It is a real phenomenon. It is a challenging dynamic and phenomenon to have an easy, simple, one-size-fits-all solution. Hence, we see Mars squaring Saturn at the end of August, beginning of September, and it is a time where we are being forced to look at these obstacles, to look at these challenges, and find creative solutions. But it is easier said than done when we're in between a rock and a hard space. So again, 2020 is not quite finished. We have some of these loose ends that are going to be resurfacing through the end of this year. It is not the end of the world, as I've been saying since the beginning of this year. It is a mini dark age. There is a time for this incredible global reprioritization. There's a video on Jupiter, Pluto, Saturn, and Pallas Athena that I put on my Patreon page at the beginning of this year. I will release this publicly on my YouTube channel. It's a very interesting video, especially because it was published before coronavirus and all these events, and yet it still is very relevant in the exposure, in the political justice. The transformation of oppressive dynamics is very well indicated by this Jupiter, Pluto, Pallas Athena conjunction going on these days, as well as the forming Saturn-Pluto square, which has not finished just yet. Now, we have a partial lunar eclipse in Capricorn coming up this weekend, square to this Mars-Chiron and trine to Uranus. This partial lunar eclipse is also on the south node of Jupiter in Capricorn. There's this theme here of there being an illumination of older dynamics. Again, societal oppression is a theme for 2020. From force, oppression, and limitation to discovering the creative solutions. That beautiful trine from the full moon to Uranus is, again, we're experiencing a kind of reflection of these societal challenges, but this is a time where we can find creative solutions. The square to Mars is kind of forcing us to stand up. There's something we need to do. There's some way to act. That's also where the crisis is taking place. How to act, what to do. But the medicine and the light at the end of the tunnel is that we can build the way. We can tear down to build up. Tearing down is not always bad. Tearing down is not always negative. Anger is not always bad. Anger is not always negative. These are challenging dynamics to do in a flowing, harmonious, peaceful way. This is a tough time to create peace. And yet, we can go through the deconstruction, the reconstruction, and we can harness anger to stand up for a cause, do something productive, creative, healing, and constructive. Now, this partial lunar eclipse on the nodes of Jupiter is also illuminating standards. Old societal standards, prejudices, religious beliefs, religious doctrines, south node of Jupiter. This kind of crusadiness, fighting against bad guys in a destructive or a reactive type of way, that's something to be wary of. And again, this is something I find much easier said than done. But really, this north node in Cancer, where the Sun and asteroid Vesta will be on this full moon, partial lunar eclipse, is really sowing this intention to come out of this false righteousness or this false religious doctrine. Oh, we're on the right side, we're on the right team, and if you believe this or that, then you've got things to watch out for. I would say that we're coming into an age where the proof's a lot more in the pudding. Healing is testable. Healing is obvious. People who are healing compassionate souls, all of the evidence of their essence and work is obvious around them. They're doing charitable endeavors. They're working to help the underdog, as opposed to bypassing the current political atmosphere or some of the reactive energy that's taking place, so on and so forth. So anger is not wrong, again, and this is very much a personal struggle for myself. I've got a natal Mars in Aries, quincunx Pluto, square Chiron, square Jupiter, square Neptune, square Saturn. So, freedom, desires, anger, due to a repression of freedom, desires, this is something that's been intense in my own life. So I can't claim to be an expert at any of this, but something that's been a part of my own life's kind of core healing and learning is understanding that my own anger is not wrong. It comes from a reactivity, what needs to be protected, what needs to be defended. But again, this is challenging to communicate in such a way that is not causing harm to others and is not causing bushfires. And I do not have a perfect track record. I by no means present myself on camera as a perfect, evolved, more advanced person, which is, by the way, why I used to introduce my videos saying I am a human being. I knew who I am. I know why I'm here. I'm here for a full learning journey, as is every one of us. This Jupiter retrograde conjunct Pluto is exposing reality. There is this complex nature to being a human being. It's not as simple as the world being pervaded with angels and demons. It's more complicated. It's less black and white. It's less one size fits all. This Jupiter retrograde conjunct Pluto is exposing societal corruption, abuse of power, authority. There is an exposure of what prior missing links have been missing from, the full picture, missing information, or societal structures that have had, pieces missing. Again, these missing pieces are now being exposed, and there's a whole nother level, and there's a whole nother dimension of seeing what's really going on beneath the surface. Now, a whole bunch of people cannot handle, and this is something we've been saying all year as well, the intensity, the revelation, the depth, the sheer horror that can come from recognizing the reality of our world and the human experience is certainly too much for a lot of people, and maybe even understandably too much for a lot of people. While we're seeing the moon's nodes squaring Neptune all of this year, There is a coping mechanism where people are going off the deep end. The dark, murky complexity of reality is not always what we want, right? It's not always comfortable or pleasant to have our smelly shit exposed. And by the way, the authentic healers and teachers and spiritual aspirants therefore put their smelly shit out and available rather than hide, deny, spiritual bypass, or sweep their own shadows under the rug. That's one of actually the green lights that someone's an authentic person, is they're admitting the full spectrum of who they are. But this is not easy, right? This is not comfortable. There's all sorts of insecurities and all sorts of fears that can come up. And there's all sorts of insecurities, obviously, and all sorts of fears that are coming up in our world this year. This is a Pluto, Saturn, Capricorn year. I mean, this is death, this is mortality, this is limitation, this is imprisonment, this is slavery, right? These are not comfortable themes. And yet, this is not punishment, this is not failure, this is not God's wrath, this is evolution. You know, it's not always what we want, but there is a whole level of depth that comes out of the mastery of taking the plunge, of confronting the reality, of going into the darkness. This is, again, what healers and teachers do. They don't stay in their privileged bubbles and form their cults and bring people out of the darkness into luxury. We have to bring the privilege, the resources, the abundance, and the medicines into the darkness. We have to be delivering that to those who are lesser fortunate. That's the actual process here. Now, this being said, this tension, this exposure, this reality is also taking place in every dimension, in every group, including the New Age movement. And obviously this is a tension that I'm involved in. And something I'm going to point out is this year is exposing and creating a divisionism, North Node in Gemini. And is divisionism wrong? Is divisionism bad? No. Divisionism means we're not all agreeing. We don't all possess the same philosophy. We don't all possess the same belief system. You know what cults say? Oh, you ought to have the same philosophy. Oh, you ought to have the same belief system. Oh, you ought to dress and appear just like us and make sure you're always smiling and make sure you've got a good beard and, you know, look like an Indian yogi, whatever it may be. That's cult philosophy. Everyone should behave the same way, have the same truth. Divisionism is called honoring the reality of what it's like to have a human experience. People don't all have the same past experiences. People don't all have the same truths. So there is a divisionism currently happening in the New Age movement that I'm going to encourage and point out. And this divisionism is between the bypass camp and the exposure camp. Okay? The bypass camp, which is, again, there is an option with Neptune square the nodes to become delusional. As it so turns out, people want to be delusional. People want to be dissociated. They don't want to be a part of this intense, heavy collective experience. So they dissociate, cop out, bypass. This is an actual phenomenon. This is why I've been speaking out against conspiracy theories. Because these conspiracy theories and the QAnon insanity and all this, it's like, hey, you can take a step into fantasy world. You know, you can go into fantasy world, as far as I can tell, as far as you want to go. You can create your own reality, but that's not to say that reality that you're living in is going to have any relevancy to anything outside of your delusion. Okay, so this is an actual collective dynamic coming up this year, which is why I'm addressing it. It's not just my own personal opinions here. So we're seeing this bypassing out there in the New Age movement, such as the all lives matter. Like, why should we address the darkness of societal oppression and the facts that there are minority groups being totally suppressed, denied, ignored, and enslaved? Because all lives matter. Oh, and it's not my job to clean up other people's messes, and I'm all light and I'm all love. It's spiritual bypass bullshit, right? It's copping out of real healing. It's copping out of real work. It's not compassionate, even slightly. Or the whole idea, again, of like, oh, America's going down, and so you should leave America. You should come join me in my privileged cult here on my magical castle in an island. And it's like, this is just privilege talking. Not everyone in America has the choice to leave. And I'm not encouraging Americans to leave this country. There's a lot of tumultuous, there's a lot of intensity, there's a lot of darkness, there's even a lot of death going on here. But it's not the end of the world. It's a changing of global power structures. And America going through its Pluto return is going to transform into something else. We need healers, we need teachers here. We need good people everywhere in the world. No need to cop out and run away from reality. Or, I'm pro everything. Everything goes. Any conspiracy theory goes. You can believe whatever you want. You're welcome to do that. You can be a racist. You can be an asshole. You can create your own cult and believe in whatever you want, even if it's like being a lemming leader, taking people off the cliff. So, anyways, this exposure camp, as opposed to the bypass camp here in the New Age movement. And again, my guess is that we're all experiencing some of the tension between these two camps, and I'm simply pointing them out on the exposure camp. Exposure camp's pointing out the widespread issues of narcissism within the New Age movement, patriarchy, sexual abuse, right? We're seeing all these sexual abuse coming out with Jupiter conjunct Pluto. This is the reality of what goes on out there in the world. The abuse of power, the manipulation of students. Now, this is extremely common in the New Age movement. So should we be sweeping these issues under the rug, or should we be exposing these issues? The answer, I'm hoping, is obvious. All right. Again, Chiron square Mars is we all have to stand up for something. We should be individuating. This is my truth. Whenever we see these teachers or leaders saying anything goes, and you can vote for anybody and you can believe in anything and I've got no opinion, really what that means is I'll take your money. I'll take your money. I don't want to upset anybody. So give me your money. We're going to play it nice. We're all going to be real happy. Oh, if anybody's dark, if anybody's angry, hiss, hiss, get out of here. Is just this, again, cult-like mentality that absorbs people, absorbs resources into a bubble that is typically not that oriented towards something that is productive, healing, or progressive. Certainly not progressive. We need to be progressive this year. This is not saying, hey, avoid this change. This partial lunar eclipse in Capricorn is an opportunity to step up into a new level of authority. We're not waiting for the world to get the clue and become a perfect place and then serve us these golden opportunities on a silver platter. We're recognizing that the world is going to have these issues and we are a part of the world. We can contribute in some way, shape, or form. And that doesn't mean self-sacrifice, it doesn't mean overextension, it means recognizing what is the work that we can do. What is the work that only we can do? Again, that's this Aries, individuality. And Capricorn, work, career, societal orientation, pressure, and gravity. Mercury stationed retrograde on June 30th, 9 degrees Cancer, and is moving retrograde back to 5 degrees Cancer, where Mercury will station direct on July 12th. Deeply reflective, nostalgic. There's a processing. There's a going back to childhood. Our old relationship with our siblings, our old relationship with our friends, how it used to be when we were in this simpler, more spacious world, perhaps. Now, we can be being led by our feelings. There's something coming back through our emotional feeling body that's very, very up at the forefront as a theme in this lunar cycle. The last new moon began this lunar cycle with a solar eclipse in Cancer. The next new moon is a second new moon in Cancer, 28 degrees. So we've got this partial lunar eclipse in Capricorn in between two Cancer new moons. And there's this theme here of weaving together all of these intensity, pressure, what's coming on out there in the world. What do we need for safe space? What do we need for self-respect? What is this safe space that we're trying to create? Again, the exposure camp is to be trauma-informed. The exposure camp is to point out the issues to create this safe space. That's why it is absolutely bypassing to say that we must always be love and light, all lives matter. That's just horseshit, because what that denies and avoids is the actual work. We've got to work to create this safe space. We've got to make the adjustments to correct these societal issues, this oppression, this abuse. This is easier said than done with the angry, reactive energy of Mars, Aries, but we can use that energy to initiate the new directions, to trailblaze the new paths forward, and to lay this foundation for this space where we are safe to do our thing. We are safe to honor ourselves. We are therefore safe and supported to do the work that we can only do because there is an environment that is respectful. And we're trying to listen to one another. And we're trying to improve. And we're trying to do our own shadow work to expose our own demons so that way we are improving and we look for that work. We invite other people. What's going on with my shadow? I don't see everything. I don't have 360-degree vision. That's the support, that's the respect, and that's the safe space. Cancer is the safe space to be vulnerable in any emotion. I am so depressed I can't stop crying. I'm so angry I just want to fucking punch a hole in the wall. I'm so overly excited I'm just bouncing off the walls, you know? And we need a space to explore those emotions. And we need this respect and the support to be our instinctual natural selves. This Chiron retrograde, this Mercury retrograde can be this very reflective going back. Ow, this hurts, and it's connected to this, which is connected to that. And we go inside. And those trail of breadcrumbs of our emotions or of our reactivity is informing us more of our story, more of our history, where we've come from, what we've lived through, what we've survived before. And here is where this partial lunar eclipse is initiating us into recognizing Cancer, self-respect. Cancer, I know what I'm doing. I know what I've lived. I may not be perfect, I still have a work in process, but this is where I'm going. This is where I want my family to go. This is where I want my relationships to go. This is where I want to live. This is where I want my home to be. Cancer. And what I encourage us to do is to use this Mercury retrograde in Cancer to be led inside and this nostalgia of childhood, how we used to feel, that feeling of openness, specialness, connectivity, mystical connection to nature, feeling close to our mother, our home, our family, whatever those feelings are that fill us up and give us the most emotional fulfillment. Those feelings can lead us from the inside out. This is how I want to feel in my future home. This is how I want to feel in my future family. This is how I want to feel in my future job with my future work associates. Those feelings can inform us of our individual unique needs, our deeper history, and lay this foundation by us stepping up, recognizing this is who I am. This is the work that only I can do. I've had these unique personal experiences. And now the world's going through all this intensity and I can take a stand for a cause. And you know what? That's healing our inner child, that's healing our past trauma and woundedness, and it's also radiating that healing in an uplifting, inspiring way to others, if we can harness this intensity constructively. Again, this full lunar eclipse in Capricorn brings up dynamics of power and control. Truth is, any one of us human beings, I'm fully admitting, if I were given too much too fast, I would go crazy too. So it's not just pointing fingers at bad guys. It's understanding the actual root core dynamics that forms these themes of societal oppression or abuse or whatever it may be. And that's where we're stepping up. That's where we're doing the work that only we can do. We're reparenting our inner child. We're redefining power structures. What does power mean? What does success mean? There's an orientation towards healthy leadership, towards forward progressive ideals, healing as opposed to conforming to societal expectations, traditional hierarchies, daddy issues, outdated religious beliefs, including the beliefs that we should look in a particular way, or be all put together, or be all organized, or appear all mature in a way that's forced or unnatural or pretending. We are redefining the standard of success. There used to be an old standard in the old world that was a little bit more achievement, hierarchy oriented, right? We wanted to have, be employee of the month or climb the ladder, and obviously the world is waking us up to more. And that's this global reprioritization. And this is how we can be redefining. What does success mean? What does success look like to you? An even better question. What does mastery feel like to you? Let that feeling of mastery lead you into the work that only you can do. It's not about taking control as a dictator, it's about having control. It's about having the reins. It's about having a grip as a stoic and inspiring role model, and we have to discover this in ourselves. Because as we can clearly see, it is not being provided so obviously out there in the world. As always, thanks for the opportunity to be the message delivery mailman for this message. Again, both the words and the energy is, I hope, emulating some of this Saturn returning to Capricorn. Again, I am raising money for the Metro Atlantic Mutual Aid Fund, raising funds for those minority groups or struggling in poverty. You can win an astrology reading from myself, Patreon membership, and I'm beginning Astro School this month of July. It's an unofficial, uncertified school. You do it at your own pace. There's going to be new materials provided every month. Again, there's an online Q&A. I'm going to start meeting twice a month. And there's also going to be, there is already an online chat. You can bring in your birth chart, communicate with other members. Members are interpreting each other's charts, giving each other's readings. By the way, my own personal opinion, anti-Capricorn, is certification is not necessary in order to have in-depth astrological education. Certification, just like these societal standards, do not necessarily indicate the skill set of an astrologer. Whenever I go to any healer or teacher and they've got a million certifications behind their desk, that, if anything's a red flag to me. Why do they need this prop of certification when, again, the proof is in the pudding when it comes to astrology, when it comes to healing? So again, I'm offering an unofficial school, which is the way I prefer to do it, through my Patreon community. We've got additional resources, a circle of like minds, so you're welcome to join us if you feel called, when the time is right. And I am absolutely wishing all the best to you as we re-enter now part 2, 2020, tying up loose ends. Absolutely wishing you the best. And as always, Cancer medicine, take care of yourself. Take care of your inner child. #1 priority.